Alright, welcome to another session of our tutorial going over the cumulative budget and invoices template. In this session I'm going to look over the report section for our quarterly report. So we have here opened up, you can see down here at the bottom, this is report Q1 for quarter 1. And this is drawing a lot of its information from the invoice as well as from the cumulative budget. And so there'll be a report for all your subsequent quarters. Continuing on down here, see I've got report quarter 2, report quarter 3, report quarter 4 in this dark blue color. Okay. Some of these other tabs you see here are just ones I'm temporarily working on. You probably won't see some of these in your edition of this spreadsheet template. So focusing here on our report, the cover page of the report is actually over here to the right as we open it up. And so it's going to automatically insert a lot of the data for us. In fact, it might be nearly everything in the report is inserted automatically, but I'm just going to review it for you, and you can double check each time you do a report at the end of each quarter. So the quarter is going to be automatically inserted, the quarter number. Again, these are all in green, so whatever's in green is automatically going to be inserted. The black is just a normal part of the document, if you will. It shouldn't normally need to be edited one way or another. The green, it's automatically inserting here the name of your organization, the name of the contract, if you have a contract number, your fiscal year, which I don't have entered in on my cumulative budget at the moment, so that's why it appears as a 0. All this data that you entered in on your cumulative budget when you began the contract would appear here, including execution date, contract expiration date, and so on, total federal funds for the project, and total matching funds, and so on. And you have your estimated for the quarter for your 319 federal funds, your non-federal matching funds, and the total. All this should fill in automatically. Now, here's a quick note about this percentage difference calculator. It's calculating this, but you could see here we have a little dash for a negative sign that's in red. Typically your expenditures are going to be a bit less actual expenditures than the estimated. Once in a while you'll have a quarter where they go over, so you would need to go in and change that to a plus sign. So again, that's why they're in red. I can see here by entering in a plus sign that Excel thinks that I'm trying to enter a formula or something, but yeah, there are ways around that. So anyway, so you just want to verify here, these are in red, whether you want a minus or a plus. So of course my actual expenditures is entered in at the moment, 886.83, are less than the 1,000 estimated, and so this is going to calculate it as 11% less. Or $500 of our matching funds that we have entered in at the moment is 50% of 1,000. So here that shows up as 50%. So that's going to be a negative. So you just need to hand enter that in. Now, let me make a little adjustment here so we can look at that a little bit further. Let's go down and change, let's say instead of 833 on this particular bucket, we spent 1,100. So going back to my report now, it's showing that jumped up. So it shows 15% difference. However, it inserts a little negative right there. As you can see, even though, and in fact, it should be a positive because this is over. So There may be a way in the formula as it's typed in up here around that I'm not aware of. I've messed with it using my very limited mathematical capability and haven't been able to figure out a way around that, creating that little negative. I've simply put in here in this column whether we want a plus or a negative, so I would put plus there if we spent more than our estimated amount. Sometimes what I've done then to get around that little negative is, after I print out this sheet and go to scan it in to submit to EPD, I simply white out that little negative right there. Perhaps there's a more advanced way to address that issue, but that's what I have come up with for now. So again, you just want to make sure that you have in here a positive or negative as appropriate, whether you spent more than the estimated amount for that category, as you can see here, then it would be a plus, or if you spent less, as you can see here with the match, if it's below your estimated, then that would be a negative, and so on. Then your contract expenditures to date, so it's going to pull these in these dates in from the beginning of the project, which would be the same date as up here generally, up to the current date. As you know, in this it's going to pull in from your invoice over here, B11. The date that you put in right here is going to show up then here on your report for your expenditures up to the date you enter in here. So, but if you're only reporting on dates, I'm sorry, let me start over. If you enter in here a date, let's say you're doing this a week after the end of the quarter, and let's say this was the quarter for January through March, so in which case you would typically fill in a date here of March 31st, but let's say you don't quite get to submitting it in on March 31st, and you're working on this on, say, April 7th. Well, then over here on your report, you might have to give attention to that. If you're only showing expenditures up through March 31st, you might want to change that to March 31st then. All right. So then it's going to automatically fill in the total project 319 funds that have been spent so far for your federal funds and your non-federal matching funds. Total for the project so far, it's going to fill these in automatically based on all that's been spent so far through all your quarters up to that particular quarter, which of course for quarter one would be only that quarter. But once you go into subsequent quarters, of course that's going to be adding all your quarters together. Then here we have our project budget. And you have total amount for that, the whole personnel bucket, or whatever given bucket you're looking at. And then it's broken down here. Again, program manager, project coordinator, and these titles, it's drawing from your cumulative budget as you've entered them in. So again, since the text is in green, that means it's drawing it in from another place. In this case, you can see it from the cumulative budget cell E8. So if you go over here, cell E8, whatever title or text you put in here, maybe you're, for that particular contract, instead of a project coordinator, it's called an implementation manager or something else, then you would change that text here, and it's going to change it in your report as well for you, and fill in whatever amounts you have for your federal or your match, and so on. Again, in most cases, you're not going to have a fourth category as I have here, personnel other, and so you can simply ignore that. Perhaps there's some unusual case in which you would have a fourth person, but I'm not aware of that. Some of these places, the cell is not quite large enough to hold the whole text, so it goes over into another cell. As you can see here, my P in project coordinator is coming over. To try and minimize that, where appropriate, I've just made the text a little bit smaller here. I've dropped it down to size 9 to try and fit it in there. So you just have to be aware of that. You know, if you had a much longer title, then it might not fit in some of these places, and you have to either make your text smaller, kind of play with your column size here. But again, you got to be very careful with that. If you start pushing it over into some of your columns over into another page or something like that, or mess with data in columns further down, you got to watch out for that. So, all right. So continuing on, you'll see here we have our fringe, and again, it's automatically going to fill in. So when you fill in, perhaps you would have typically 3 employees, at least that's what we do in our organization, where we're getting fringe for. So in our cumulative budget, where you enter that in at the beginning of the contract right here, or I might type in fringe for, let's just say 3 employees there, then it's going to fill that in for me in the report, fringe for 3 employees. The amounts will all fill in there based on whatever you enter in the invoice, or if you have it blank in the invoice, it's going to just leave that as a dash. In other words, 0. Here we have our travel. Again, it should fill it all in. This here, some of this data may be pulling, well, it looks like it's all pulling from the invoice. Yeah, just the way that I've set it up. Okay, and then it's going to automatically tabulate your cumulative federal and your cumulative match there. So on down through these categories. As I mentioned before, many of your contracts are not going to have all of these categories or sub-buckets, if you will, in each one, and so you could just hide those or delete them if necessary at the beginning of a particular project. So here I can see I can just hit hide. And you'll have to do that to some degree to in order to get page breaks at a suitable point. If we go up here in Excel to view and hit page layout, it's going to show where those page breaks are going to occur. And so here, if you wanted to get this equipment down on here, you'd have to insert some lines, but of course you got to be very careful here on this first page, whatever you do, because it's going to affect that this page over here. But going from this point down, page 1, then it won't matter what you do with your rows. So yeah, coming down here, looks like at the moment our contractual table for our contractual just ended just right when I went up and hit a few rows up here. So you'll just have to work with that with each individual contract and each quarter based on as needed, potentially hiding some of these rows that you're not using. If you go all the way down to the bottom, it will again automatically tabulate your totals for you. It'll insert the date for you. Even the name is going to be drawing here from with the name on the invoice. So whatever name you put for the person doing the invoice, which I have automatically set up to draw from cumulative budget here to be whoever your admin person is. But of course you could change that, and when you change it on the invoice, then it will automatically change it on the report as well. Put in the name and the title. Again, it'll insert the date and so on. Then here down below we have our minority business and women business enterprise utilization form, which I have a little bit of tweaking I can see based on the size of the cells to do. The size of the columns at the moment, see it's jumping over on that page, but hopefully the copy you'll be working with, that'll be adjusted and appropriate so that that form appears. Normally we haven't generally in the contracts I've been a part of have anything to fill in this form. It's just blank, but that form does need to go along, a printed copy of that blank form with each and every report each quarter. Again, as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, some of these texts don't quite fit into the cell. In some cases I've made it smaller so it fits in. In other cases you may see some where I actually made the text larger so that you don't see a portion of it that's not necessary. For here, for example, with office space, you don't need the word other in there because we know this is the other bucket because of you can see it right there. And so again, you can edit that in your cumulative budget template as suits you. You can see here, if we scroll over to the other section, these are all our other sub buckets. And so I have the word other added by each one: other office space, other cell, other internet. But of course, you could eliminate that word other if as long as it suited your purposes. Alright, I think that's a general overview of the report in order to give you a general idea of how it functions. One final thing I guess I need to add is here in your footer it has the name of the project, and that's in red, so you'll need to add that in, type that in yourself. Everything else should be automatic and filled in already for you.